Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Britton Williams, wealth advisor, and we'll be talking to him about how one can have a good quality of life, high quality of life in retirement. Welcome to the show, Britton.
So great to be here, AJ.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's nice to have you on the show. So, firstly, just to understand from you, you focus specifically on the pre-retirees over the age of 50. Why
Right.
did you specifically decide to go for this particular section of people?
Yeah, so over 50, it tends to be a critical time in a person's life. You're entering the end of that second chapter of one's life. In the first chapter, you're learning what you want to do. You go through school, you find what your career path is, you get married, maybe you have kids, perhaps you excel in your career, you have to fund their college, you have to, or they're after high school, whatever they want to do in life, you're there for their children until they're 18, 20, 22 years old. And then you get into your 30s and you're high earners, you're in your 40s, you're starting to enjoy life. And then all of a sudden you wake up, you're 50 years old, you've saved some money into your 401k, your employer has helped you put some money away. Maybe you've got some other savings and inheritance, and the next path ahead of you is retirement. It's in the distance, but you don't know how to get there, and there's a lot of moving parts. And so what I've experienced with clients, and I've got some stories to share, but they come to us with a sense of urgency and concern about whether they will be okay. And the good news is they still have time, and they haven't made a bunch of mistakes, perhaps, because when you get into your 60s, you have these pressures in the US to maybe take Social Security, and you can take it at different times. Maybe you have a pension, you can have different options around that, pension income, maybe you take the lump sums. You have all these different decisions to make that set yourself up for the next third chapter of your life, hopefully and well into your 90s. But you're no longer potentially working. And so there's a lot of unknowns. We have a lot set forth for us in the early part of our lives, the different options, different career paths. But when it comes to retirement, we're kind of we're on our own of what we've built to that point. And so there's a lot of mistakes that can be made in that pivotal moment. And so it doesn't have to be over 50, but that's typically the average age. You're heading into retirement, you're 10 to 15 years out. That's who we work with. And there's a lot of opportunities for us as professionals. We focused on at Calamita Wealth, retirement planning or financial planning for all of our clients. And it goes beyond just the investments. We can talk about that in a little bit, but it really simplifies to just 4 areas. We integrate and coordinate all forms of planning. There's cash flow management, that's 1. There's investment positioning, that's 2. There's a third piece that's tax planning, and then the 4th piece is estate preservation. But it goes back to the clients' lives, and I want to make sure that's clear, because I love the conversations around the lifestyle and what they want to do, and that's what I get to revisit with those pre-retirees heading into retirement, or what they like to do when they were younger. They forgot about how to enjoy life sometimes. And so, that's really why, it drives me. And there's also an opportunity to help others in that area. And it's mutually beneficial for both of us.
Right, right. So at the age of 50, you want them to get back to school and to understand about their own finances, which is the right thing to do. They should have been there much earlier on. Even people in the financial line but they are not prepared for retirement. So to understand from you, Britton, is that what are the things are common financial issues that pre-retirees deal with, so that even those who
Yeah.
are in the late 30s or early 40s, they know about it much early on, so that by the time they come to you when they are 50, 49, 50, they are in a better position for you to handhold them in a better manner, so that you can give them the life that they want to live when they retire.
Yeah, there's so much to do, but there's a lot that's in people's ways. So I'll start with some of the common mistakes that I've seen along the way and and barriers in my experience. And one of them is just not being able to cut out the noise and all the information, talking heads on TV. And so a lot of the stressors that we have are manifested through what we're being told, what we're hearing, what we want to hear. And so our biases are confirmed and so forth. So anyways, that's one of the things that challenges that I see is are they really stressed out about the investments or what's going on in their financial lives, or is it what they're being fed on the internet, on TV, social media, and so forth? So that's top of the list. Other one is just simply not planning for it and hoping for the best. We get into these rhythms of life and set it and forget it, and we forget that there's a need to put together a plan and also update it periodically to make sure the assumptions that we're using life shows up. That's really what's dictating where we're heading. And so oftentimes I'll run into a lot of people who like to do it themselves. That's fine, do it, and that's works for a long time up until the point where you have to make some really tough decisions and coordinate everything along the way. So I would suggest definitely saving towards retirement, 10 to 15% of your what you're making, but making sure that you're willing to talk with somebody and you're open to suggestions from a financial professional that fits your needs, because there's different people in this industry, and it's important to pair up with somebody that you're going to get along with. Now, when it comes to Social Security, there's different options with that. And the earliest you can take in the US is 62 years old, and there's different times to do that. So you want to run that by a professional, just because there's so many different variables. And not to get into the weeds and the technical difficulties, but also some tax planning strategies. Those are some mistakes that I've seen people ignore early in retirement, because you're making money and you're going from a high earner, a high tax bracket, and then all of a sudden you drop. And so there's opportunities on both ends of that spectrum to take advantage of and to be aware of. Things not to do before retirement, things to do once you're in retirement to take advantage of what you're now into a lower tax bracket. One of them being is they're called Roth conversions, and that's converting your pre-tax savings into tax-free income. And that's going to be more beneficial to do when you're in a lower tax bracket. And so I'll do an analysis to see what the impact is of that, because typically we want to see where your tax bracket is into retirement. If it's going to increase, but it's lower on the front end, there's some opportunities in the first few years, and that window is pretty short. Another thing is to refinance their house, and they take out a 30-year mortgage. So it's common to be roped in, especially when rates were very low up until this year, to refinance your house over the past few years, past couple especially. And lenders are very good at selling you on that 30-year mortgage, which isn't going to be beneficial if you're 50 years old, because we lose sight of the point of like paying this debt off prior to retirement. That debt becomes a big cost, even when it's a mortgage. And understanding the philosophy differences of it being good debt, but my experience is there are two big expenses in retirement for retirees, and that's debt and taxes. And if you can start to lower those two, that would provide you more to spend on your lifestyle and the lives that you haven't really visited in a long time, because you'll be on a more fixed income. You're not going to be on this accelerated growth earning power that you have while you're working. So that's another piece of it with the mortgage. and the debt, it is a good idea to align that term on the mortgage when you expect to retire. So I'm 41. I don't know when I'm going to retire, but I'm not going to refinance on another 30 years, maybe 15 or 20. Another mistake that I've seen is that we love our kids. We want to put them first. But when it comes to paying for university, college expenses, and their future, there's a balance between that and retirement savings and funding. And knowing what your philosophy is on what you want to spend, you and your spouse want to fund, it's important for that conversation to be had with a financial advisor. But more importantly, not sacrificing your retirement savings for your kids' college. There's a saying that you can borrow for college, but you can't borrow for your retirement. Now, there is this issue with a lot of debt, especially in the US, when it comes to college. And I'm not a big fan on taking a lot of debt out for it, but there's a lot of other funding sources like grants, scholarships, that you have access to. You don't have access to that for your own self in retirement. So putting the kids first is a bit of a paradox there. So I want to be aware of that. That's a mistake that I see happen a lot, because there's a big range of costs when it comes to different schools, and each school has different endowments and willingness to provide resources for their children. So I want to make for the students. So I want to make sure you look into not just where your kids want to go to school, but also, what you can afford and what's available to you through the aid at these schools.
Right.
Yeah. And then another thing is just when it comes to the investments, one thing that I want to make, this is probably the one most important thing that I've seen that's misunderstood and overlooked when it comes to planning over the years into retirement, is not acknowledging the risk. And if you don't manage this risk, it can implode your whole plan. And I see most clients early on, when I first speak with them, they're taking too much risk with their retirement savings. And so we have to go through that and make sure it's more in line. For example, I was meeting with a new client this past fall at the top of the market. He was 100% equities and stocks, and I immediately got him rebalanced into a more an allocation that's more in line with his risk. Markets dropped 20+% since then. I don't have a crystal ball, but at the end of the day, he didn't need to take that much risk. And so that's important to acknowledge with a financial advisor.
Right, Britton. Now, let's go a bit early on in one's life. Is that you talked about a lot of noise from everywhere. Now, and then there is already, it's an understood thing that there is so much in this whole industry is plagued with greed. And there is so much of talk about mis-selling and pushing products, even by several financial advisors. It's
Right.
everywhere. Even in India, we have seen that happening. And then there is this new concept now that people have to be, much more registered. They have to declare, and there are much more checks and balances. But at the end of the day, it's never going to be that utopian world that we may think of. But when checks and balances are there, there can be a better situation. But how can a person cancel that noise that's always around him or her when they are in their 30s or even in their 40s, and think about a stage in life where they may not be earning as much
Mm-hmm.
after a particular point in time? And when do they know at that time, when they still have time,
Yeah.
that how much money is enough for them to retire with? Otherwise, that whole calculation goes haywire. And then suddenly, when you are 50 or you move beyond that, then you start looking at for a financial advisor. So, several questions at the same time, but just you can put all your knowledge to help people understand, not just in the US, but other places also, even in India, how to be aware about such things?
Yeah.
What are the things that they can do early on when they still have time? How do they do that?
Yeah, I think that I like simple plans, and this is borderless. I think that there's a lot that we do that's specific to the US, but I think the philosophy can be uh, laid out anywhere. And I think the earlier start, the better. And my experience is that when we're young, that's really when we need some of the guidance along the way because there's so many life transitions. And so what I would suggest is having a savings plan early, even in your 20s, before you have kids, before you're getting married, before you have all these other expenses, and to have this habit of you've got an account at least at the bank that you're saving towards. More importantly, you're investing it and it's growing. And learning a little bit about the investing early or having somebody like a financial advisor, because there's a lot of options out there, at least in the US, that you can find somebody to work with you even when you don't have a lot of money. But let's say you don't, and you got to do it yourself. Put away 10 to 20% of what you're earning and have that constant and live off of the balance to fund your life, the lifestyle that you have. And then when you meet somebody and you get married and you have kids, you keep that 10 to 20% savings rate going into your savings account or investment. Again, it's important to invest it so you're keeping up with inflation, which is we all deal with that. And so like that's a simple approach to it that I would do. But there's also, definitely some questions if you're not familiar with how to invest that you want to get answered by a professional. But at least you have this muscle that you've developed and you're starting to exercise that you're saving towards and it doesn't have to be for retirement, but it can be for your lifetime goals along the way. Because when I'm 20 years old, it was hard to convince me to start saving for retirement, even at 30. But you're starting to build your wealth along the way. And so having and when it comes to the noise, AJ, I think that it's important to acknowledge that it's noise. There's a lot of and why are they on TV? Like there's a reason why they're out there, and asking yourself, how are they making money? Well, they're selling ads. It's theater. A lot of it's theater. And I'm not going to name any names, but it's at the end of the day, our eyeballs are buying it. So there is a lot of information out there, and we can get sucked down into it. And to find a trusted source is good to anchor yourself to that plan. And that's going to be like a financial advisor to help you along the way. Even a little bit of advice would help. You don't need to meet with them all the time, but him or her will be able to help you, guide you along the way. And I think the openness to that is important. A lot of people want to do it themselves. They think they know how to do it. And then greed sets in. I think you mentioned a really good point. There's two emotions that control the markets, stock markets. It's really greed and fear. Okay. And we saw that play out this past couple of years. Last year, we saw the climactic push of greed, and now we see the fear set in this year, at least in the US. And I think that it's important to be aware that we can really get hypnotized by that and sucked in. So it's important to just stick with your plan and not get too greedy what you're investing in. But as far as like what you're saving for, I mean, I don't like to always use the word retirement, especially with younger folks. So it's important to just having a habit of saving and investing early on is important. And then also, meeting with a financial advisor.
Right. Now let's look at things from the retiree perspective.
Okay.
You talk about financial concerns of retirees, especially four biggest financial concerns that they have. If
Yep.
you talk about it now, perhaps the younger people, by the time they come to that stage, they would have taken care of these concerns earlier on. So that's why I ask, trying to put the
Yeah.
not so old and the young together, so that when they make that transition or that journey towards that phase of life, whether you call it retirement or to achieve life goals, as life expectancy is going up, then they would save themselves from those concerns when they actually come down to that particular stage.
Yeah, I think that integrating and coordinating those areas that I mentioned early on, and I'll list them again. The first one is cash flow management.
Okay.
And I'll go through each one real briefly. And that's just really how much money you need now and later. That's your spending. That's how much you're making from your job and how much you're spending on expenses. And so managing that cash flow is important. In other words, you can take on a lot of debt, for example, and leverage yourself to the point where you don't have any more money left. So it's important to have a balance there with the cash flow. The second piece is the investments. We just talked about that, and making sure that you have your risk managed in those investments. And then the third one is tax planning and making sure you're aware of not just how you're filing your taxes, but what opportunities you can take to when it comes to taxes. And the fourth one rather, is everything you own. So it's the estate preservation and preserving it along the way. And in the US, you want to have insurance to protect that. And we're a fee-only independent advisor, and we don't make money on these commissions on insurance products, but we want to make sure you get the right amount. So it's important for you to acknowledge how much you need for life insurance and other forms of insurance, and making sure you have a will to make sure that your assets pass to people, your friends and family that you want. And so the coordination of those areas is where you have somebody who's a fiduciary who's working for you in your best interest at some point in time in your life. But even before that, you at least know that there are 4 areas. Any decision that impacts you financially will fit somewhere in those 4 financial quadrants.
Right.
And so when you get to the retirement phase, you have that awareness, and you've got this plan somewhat intact. So the earlier you start, the better. And a lot of times, a lot of these decisions won't come up until later on, but at the same time, you have all these, life is in charge. So things are out of your control every day. And it's important to not just stick with one plan and not pivot. So it's important to be open to change.
Right. And along with all these suggestions, where does your compass approach fit in? That wealth management approach that you have developed with people.
Yeah, that's a great, glad you asked, AJ. So the financial compass is something that we came up with through our experience with working with clients. And it's essentially acknowledging that we want to focus on what's out of order in your life. And so there's really 3 different sections to this compass. There's restoring order, there's financial peace, and then lifestyle objectives. And so when I go into a meeting with somebody, especially if I don't know a lot about their story, we all have things that keep us up at night. And a lot of times that goes back to our finances, but we may not be aware of that. And there might be a financial solution to that. And so these barriers that we have in our way, we can't sleep at night, our minds are racing for whatever reason. And then you wake up and maybe it's still stirring around. Maybe it wanes and it comes back. Maybe it's buried for weeks. And so I want to know what's going on deep inside my clients, because that tends to be a barrier that needs to be acknowledged and that can pass through and really enjoy their lifestyle objectives, their goals in life, especially with retirees, because that's really what this is all about is to enjoy life. And so, for example, I met with a couple the other day, and they both work, both have jobs. One's a teacher, one works at a bank, both have a couple of kids under the age of 10. They both have retirement savings, and so they've got a really good path ahead of them to get to retirement. But they don't always have the opportunity to talk because she travels, he teaches, and they're raising kids, and so but because they have kids, like, that's something that is different for everybody when it comes to paying for their college and funding it. And so we were talking about college planning and the wife's feelings and having to pay for their child's college. She didn't have to pay for her college, but the husband had to work through college. So now financially, I could say, you should do this, but I want to acknowledge their philosophies, and their situation may be different from another client's. So financial planning is more of an art form in this example. And that is a very sensitive topic when it comes to paying for a children's college, at least my experience. And so knowing so I knew that nothing was going to be resolved on this call, but there could be something we could walk away from it on common ground. But first, I need to respect both of their views. And so in the US, there's an account called a 529 plan that you can save towards. It has tax benefits to it. And then there's a balance of saving also towards what's called a taxable account, which is an individual account or joint account that they can start savings towards. And so while we were talking in this meeting, the husband sent me a text message and said, let's move on from this topic because they're not on the same page. This is a virtual meeting, so we weren't in person. And so I knew to quickly bring it in for a landing. But my point is that something was out of order here, and we would need to have another conversation about it too. But something's in their way when it comes to college planning for them. But let's end on what we can all do today, and that was to just start saving some amount per month towards this goal. And then, going towards, that's an example if you have kids, but, we all have anxieties and stressors in the world that impact us and keep us up at night. And so I'm trying to have those conversations with my clients and addressing it through those 4 financial quadrants of, is there a solution? Now, I don't have a solution for everything. I mean, we all have things that come up all of a sudden in our lives. I have a lot of clients who are taking care of their older parents, and long-term care expenses in the US is very, very high, but it's not just a financial burden, but it's an emotional one as well. And so it's a new, unexpected event that may come up, that all of a sudden they have to spend a large percentage of their time caring for their parents, away from their jobs, away from their kids. And so that's something that it's important for me to acknowledge that ahead of time, because I know they're heading that potentially direction at some point in their life, but sometimes it's all of a sudden. And so bringing it back to the lifestyle objectives, that third area is broken down by essentially financial goals. And what would you like to be doing? Like, what would give you joy in life? These are questions that I would ask my clients, is like, what would you like to be able to do? What's your ideal day look like in retirement? And so it's trying to address the clouds in our lives and bring it to the sunny part. But I feel like I help them acknowledge where they are, some solutions to any issues, and then really to start talking about what they like to do with their time, whether they can do it or not in this moment. But let's set it up as a goal to go on that trip to Scotland or to Australia. Maybe it's 2 to 3 years away, and maybe it just seems impossible right now because of what's going on. But let's not forget about it. And a lot of times they don't have, the couples, they don't have time to acknowledge it because they're so emotionally and financially engulfed in what's out of order. And so that's the financial compass. It's more of a mindset than anything, but we do have a diagram, one pager that we use in some of the meetings.
Right, right. Uh, Now, Britain, in terms of, there are a lot of young people, especially in today's time, who are, doing a lot of independent work. You people work with a lot of people who have got, proper jobs, who are, and then they retire. So there is at least a lot of some wealth, good amount of wealth that needs to be managed. But younger lot who believe, a lot of people are doing independent work as consultant freelancers, and a lot of people are believing in that concept of the great resignation, living the life
Right.
that they want. And then there are many people, or especially youngsters, who believe that, that is the term called YOLO, you only live once. And then in that whole aspect of living for the day, you forget about tomorrow,
Right.
where they don't. What would you advise this huge portion of people who are thinking just for today, maybe tomorrow, but not the day after? How do they, what they can learn from you in terms of, wealth management, so as when they come to that particular stage in life, then they have enough wealth for you guys to manage. Otherwise, when there is no wealth, what exactly will you manage? What would you tell them? How should they look at the future in terms of planning, in terms of financial planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I would say, they may not listen to it and take action to it, but my understanding is, when it comes to and I think of crypto, I think of the retail traders, I think of the bright shiny objects that when we have a little bit of money early on in our lives, that we want to buy it, especially when other people are doing it. And there's a certain feel good to that, and there is a certain comfort because other people are doing it, and that kind of confirms that this is the right thing to do. And there's a lot of credentialed people who are validating some of these investments. And I've been open to crypto, for example, as a potential technology for the future. But just like it reminds me a lot of the dot-com stocks in the late 90s, early 2000s. I was around for that crash. It ended the same way this is ending at the moment. And it goes back to greed and fear. So what would I suggest they do is turn off that noise and not invest everything in one thing. When it comes to those high risk investments, and there's more than the ones I just mentioned, but we all know what they are, I like to keep it between 1% and 5% of what your total portfolio is. And that doesn't matter whatever amount it is. Really, 1% is what, when it comes to crypto and other risk investments, if you invest in it at all. But because you just don't, there's so many losers that are going to come out of this. And so it's important that, and that's outside of like buying material objects like cars and watches and things like that don't bring any sort of return to your wealth. So building your wealth is buying something that's going to appreciate, provide cash flow now and later. And so there are index funds that you can purchase that are lower risk in the US, and there are mutual funds and 401ks that you just start saving. You just start putting it away. You're not thinking about it. You're not trading it. You're investing it for the long term. And if you start young and you just let it go, it's boring. It is, compared to the excitement of when it comes to those big volatile moves. But it's going to build your wealth over the long term. And I think that, Buffett said it best, Warren Buffett, that people don't get rich because they don't have the patience to get rich, to build wealth. It just takes time. And so the noise, we all have to figure out a way to cancel that out. But we have current events that are proving that it was just a lot of noise that's been going on. And when it comes to unregulated investments, I would stay away from them. Because even those who are running these companies could not know what really is going on. And that's been it's going to be, I guess, come out and proof in the pudding. But I think that it goes back to starting young, start saving 10 to 15%. If you can do 20%, that's great. But I think you got to meet with somebody who's an advisor to give you some objective advice along the way, because I don't know your personal situation. And so this isn't financial advice here, but it's just, some suggestions that I've seen that's worked, but really want to acknowledge that risk. And that's what we're talking about here is living in the moment. By all means, enjoy that moment and, take some risks along the way. But the money that we put into some of these risky assets, we have to be prepared to lose. And especially when we go all in, we have to expect that outcome, not the outcome of thousands of % of a return that we may be marketed as. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Right. Britton, you are associated with Calamita Wealth Management. Now, it took you quite some time to find this sort of a firm which was aligned to the principles that you wanted to live with and align yourself with a company. How do people find the right place or advisors for themselves, like you found for yours to be, to work with? Is it such a difficult task to actually, find the right advisors in an industry, as we earlier talked about, is also plagued with so much of, greed? How does one do that in these times?
Wow, it's a great question, because AJ, there are a lot of different financial advisors when it comes to making money. Like, we all want to make money. I'm just human when it comes to that. So you want to know how your financial advisor is making money. I think that's important to know, because there's a lot of different sources of revenue in this industry alone, like all industries. There are guardrails and regulations in the US that when it comes to investment advice, we are strictly regulated. So there are things that we can't do for money, but we are a fee-only independent advisory firm at Calamita Wealth. And, when it comes to fee-only, that's how we make money. And so this fee that we charge is just on the assets under management that we're managing. Or we could charge for financial planning. But if we're managing your investment assets, we're not going to be charging for financial planning. We're just going to do it for all of our clients. Very few of our clients do we charge for the financial plan. That's usually those who just don't have enough for that assets under management relationship. So if you're looking for an advisor, ask yourself, what do you need? So if you're early on and you're still building that wealth, then looking for a fee-only advisor, it could be a solution in the US of somebody who's just making a fee on their advice that they're giving you or the services they're provided. What they're not making money on are commissions on products like insurance, annuities, and investment products. That, in our opinion, presents a conflict of interest. So if I give advice to my clients, I don't have to ask myself how much money I'm going to make on this advice. And it's kind of setting ourselves up as true fiduciaries. Not that it's a bad thing to make money on these products. By all means, sell these products. But it depends on what you're looking for. And so if it comes to this particular piece of of your life when it comes to like managing your wealth and doing the right thing for you, then I feel like it's going to find a fiduciary who's in the role of doing it just for you. Yeah, they're making money on some part of the process, but there's not a conflict of maybe this product is good for you, maybe it's not. And so the internet is definitely a source to look for this, but I think there's some keywords, and there's some good, Investopedia has some resources when it comes to looking for the right financial advisor. There's other sites that you can use out there that can provide you as a resource, but ultimately I think it's more to look at like what you don't want to get caught up in is somebody selling you something that's best for them, not you. And even early on in your life, there are advisors out there who have a business model to just provide hourly fee or a one-time financial plan that would be investing in yourself to make sure you're on that path early on in your life. And so what we do is we like to talk with everybody and provide a solution to everybody we meet with, and we have a network of other advisors who provide different solutions to solve the same problem. Like they just do it a little differently that may be a better fit for them. So there are solutions out there, but it's just to be aware of, some of the pitfalls that I've seen people make the mistakes early on in their life. They bought a product that 5 years later it's no longer good, but they can't get out of it because they need to, because life showed up and they need to sell it. But if they did, it would be very costly to do that.
Right, right. And how do people who want to, know more about you guys or to hire you guys or engage with you, how do they do that? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, AJ, it's thanks for asking. My there's email. There's our website is calamitawealth.com. If you visit that, you'll see how to set up a call with me. There's a link to set up a call in my Calendly, and a complimentary 30-minute call, and that's to go through and just meet you where you are. And I also have an email address, britton@calamitawealth.com. That's BRITTON at calamitawealth.com. And that's probably the two best ways to get in touch with me.
Right. My last question to you, Britton, is that you are a wealth advisor.
Yeah.
And so much of money matters must be on your head all the time about clients, how to give them the best advice, how to lead them the best to your ability at the stage when they are actually so much of looking at you, dependent in a way on your advice, because that will determine that future. So how do you manage to, do you always think about money, wealth, or is it also you have your eyes on, goals of life? How do you manage that part for yourself? Or is it that you believe just that money is everything and wealth is everything, and that is as long as you have money, you won't have a problem? Or is it that there is something beyond that? How do you manage these two parts of your one life in the best manner possible, because there is so much in the head at the same time?
It's a beautiful question. It reminds me of some of the questions I ask my clients of what gives them joy in life. What's your ideal look like? The ideal day look like? What are 3 things that make up that ideal day? And I have an example of a client. She's not married and she's got plenty of money that was saved up. She retired somewhat early, and she moved towards the beach, and she lives off of her Social Security and pension income, and she doesn't spend any of her money from her investments. And And I asked her that question, like, what makes up, like, just name 3 things that, we'll call her Sally. Just name 3 things, Sally, that you want to do today in retirement. Because I was trying to get her to spend some of her money, because she just wouldn't do it, because she feels like maybe it's going to run out, but she had plenty. And her day would start out with getting up early and watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee. The second thing would be she would take a long walk with their dog. And she would end her day. She went also go on a picnic in the middle of that, but she would end her day, being of service to somebody else, like going to a homeless kitchen, or she had some involvement with her church, and that would give her fulfillment, and that would make up her ideal day. And so I say that story, I share that story is because it's important to revisit what really makes us happy, and it's not money. In fact, my experience personally and with others, when we strip down to, you can say the word nothing, but really that's where happiness is being happy in the moment and in the present. And that might be, moving to the mountains or the beach and taking on a new hobby, and those experiences and those activities that you're doing with your life, that gives us joy. And having the money, the wealth part of it, the financial wealth, taken care of and managed properly, and so you can sleep well at night is important. And so our clients can enjoy those moments, and so we all can experience life, continue to into retirement. That has nothing to do with money. And so that's what that question reminds me of, is going back to the basics of what made us happy as kids, and what were the hobbies, like inspired by whether it was parents or coaches or teams or sports that we played on, whether it's cricket or football or basketball. Maybe we go back and coach a little league or something like that. And so that's wealth. That's really true wealth when it comes to that. I can't manage that. That's up to others, up to my clients to experience it, but I can help guide them in that direction. So yeah, thanks for the question, AJ. This has been great. This has been really, really great. I enjoyed it.
On this note, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.